Well, welcome Australian Veteran News viewers, and I'm very pleased to be sitting here at the headquarters of RSL Queensland with the new President Stephen Day and the CEO Robert Skoda, and it's terrific to actually be out and doing a live interview rather than something via Zoom, something we're not quite accustomed to. It's been a while, so we'll work through this, but it's been terrific, and thanks for inviting us here. We're really excited about actually having an on-site interview with you both. Today's interview will be focusing on what lies ahead for RSL Queensland, and we'd probably like to dive into a little bit about the challenges, some of the issues you may have sort of encountered over recent years, and that sort of thing. And I'd also like to maybe touch on a little bit about the hearings of the Royal Commission, which started off here in Queensland late last year. So if we can go through those two things, that'd be terrific. But welcome to you both, and thanks for giving us the time and inviting us into your building.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for travelling up, and I agree with you that we are here in person, all of us, is a sign that maybe COVID's not going to continue to define our lives as it has the last couple of years.
Absolutely, and it's been a real challenge, I think, for a lot of people, and a lot of veterans and their families, their businesses, all sorts of things going on, and I guess also in delivering support. So Rob, you might have encountered a few challenges in actually how to make those services run and keep them operating efficiently.
Yeah, we did, Mark. It was a different way of delivering services, but I think it also allowed us to realise the scale and the way that we can engage with people remotely and get the right level of service to them.
Yeah.
And it's still going from strength to strength. Like, we've got 67 veterans in our homelessness program tonight, working through, with us to get that permanent long-term outcome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're still on the upwards trajectory in all of our services.
Are there any little pleasant surprises out of it? You've learned a few things, ways of doing things that, some benefits from I guess, facing into those challenges?
There's been some benefits, particularly where there might be veterans located but not necessarily the right face-to-face contact.
Yeah.
And people's ability to utilise, mobile phone, Teams, whatever it might be, to actually engage, sending their information through via email, and us being able to mobilise the right level of support's been interesting.
And I'm guessing it probably goes both ways, that the organisations are being a little bit more proactive about that kind of outreach, but also people are being a bit more willing to use the phone or the internet or whatever to engage with you as well.
Yeah, that's it. And also it just demonstrates the capability at our sub-branch level as well across the state to be able to connect with veterans and work collaboratively together to get the right outcomes.
Yeah, terrific. Well, Stephen, congratulations on your election as President of RSL Queensland. I think we might just start out by getting a little bit of a sketch from you. What do you think the opportunities that lie ahead for, I think maybe we start off with RSL nationally as a movement, and then maybe bring that into a bit of focus around Queensland, if you would.
Yeah, very happy to, Mark. Perhaps before I do, we mentioned the word homelessness, and we sort of moved on, which was fine enough.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the story that's affected Australians, but veterans, of course, is our interest. I know of two cases. I know a young veteran who was not long out of the Navy, who borrowed money to set up, it was actually an online business, but just before COVID. And because of COVID, what she was dealing in was no longer attractive. So her business fell over, she was in debt, and she became homeless. It can happen extraordinarily quickly. And there's another fellow who was reached out to me, a Navy cook he had been, evidently very successful in the restaurant business. Just before COVID, he borrowed money to establish 3 restaurants. Of course, we all know what happens in the restaurant business in COVID. Collapsed, he's in significant debt, and has been living in his car. So this issue of COVID and homelessness is real. But that wasn't what asked.
No, it wasn't, but it's interesting that it's on top of mind though, and I mean for both of you in terms of what you've just outlined. And you mentioned, how many did you say, Robert?
So 67 tonight.
67
is the current stats. Working through that program, and it's not just about roof overhead, although that's the first priority. It's about getting that holistic support model to enable their independence and sustainability in life.
This, I mean, as you pointed out, Stephen, this is a wider community issue, but it has, there are long-term effects, I guess, and some veterans have unique challenges of being disconnected or dislocated from their families because of their service. So they've moved away or they've found themselves in locations where they don't have that natural support. So what are sort of some of the things that you're thinking about in relation to that at the moment?
Well, we've got a good partner program, but perhaps I'll let Rob speak about it. He's got some more current sort of expertise on it than I have.
Yeah, so in terms of our engagement, with the partner programs, we recognise that RSL Queensland in isolation is not necessarily best equipped with every skill, knowledge and attribute to be able to realise the outcomes that we're seeking. So we see our role in many cases as enabling. So how do we as an organisation facilitate and empower and work with other organisations to get that holistic support model to veterans and their families, whether that be through combination of sub-branch support on the ground at the grassroots of the organisation, which is the core purpose of this organisation, all the way through to those very professionally established and sort of larger organisations like the Salvation Army that have a really bespoke capability in areas
so
like
it goes back to a conversation you and I had some time ago about case management and that being a core service of the RSL and the veteran centres and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I might leave that one just for a moment. We'll bring it back up to where we're going to start around the opportunities that lie ahead for RSL as a movement. Obviously we can talk about the challenges, but I guess the opportunities, how we're going to meet those challenges and that sort of thing. So you can take it either way you like, but be interested to know what are you thinking? What's your vision for? Well, what do you see as the challenges for RSL nationally, and what role would you like Queensland to be playing in supporting the national agenda?
I'm conscious what I'm about to say. I actually haven't discussed with my colleagues at National whether this is the best way for them to find out. I guess I'll learn. But I think there are two areas that I think are opportunities for us to be better at. They apply here in Queensland as much as I believe they do at the national one. And the first one is leadership. Tone and style of leadership. We need to make sure, those of us who have these positions of privilege, that we lead in a way that is consistent with the nobility of our purpose. Now, a lot of veterans have a lot of views on leadership, but there's one I'd like to stress, and it's humility. Like a lot of folks, I've worked in a lot of teams. A couple weren't real good, most of them terrific. But there are only two great teams that I have worked in. And the thing that was different about those two teams from all the others is that they had humility, organisational humility. Now, humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself, in my view. It means thinking about yourself less often and about others, your purpose. It certainly doesn't mean that you are uncertain or lack confidence. Exactly. From my perspective, it's the opposite. Now, you're entirely secure and comfortable as a human being, and that you're open to the ideas and not at all threatened by the views of others, and that's how we'll grow. So setting that leadership tone and having our existing members, and hopefully the rest of the veteran community, feel that that's how we go about things, is very important for me. That's the first one.
Right. And we'll talk about a little bit more about the how. I mean, I know obviously setting the example and those sorts of things, using your skills and your experience to do that. Are there things that you think you might be able to show some leadership in Queensland that others might be able to follow or emulate that would be positive for the movement in general?
Time will tell.
Mm.
I will lead by my behaviour and action, and we'll see if others think that's worthy. But can I say that there is no greater privilege in a working life than to be invited to lead your fellow citizens. And you need to be worthy of that. Leadership is a gift given to you by those who follow. You need to be worthy of it. So I'll let my actions talk and others can judge.
Sorry, that going a little bit off script here, but that plays into a current issue. Maybe it's probably a bit difficult for you guys to talk about it, but the way democracy is actually implemented across the states is quite different in terms of voting and all that. And I don't want to get into the models and what's better and what's worse, but have you got anything that you're prepared to share just about from your own experience or your own ideas about the model for ensuring that veterans' voices are heard, but also that there is, good community, people coming together at least at the sub-branch level and doing things at the local level. Because I think one of the issues is the idea of one veteran, one vote. Of course, everybody gets a vote. They just sort of turn up to exercise their vote, and it may be counted in different ways in different states and all that sort of thing. But the other thing is about, what is the smallest sort of part of the RSL that is the most important? Is it the individual veteran on their own, or is it they're working together in sub branches, or does it go up another level to the state branch and gets consolidated there? So I'm interested if you've got a view on any of that.
Well, certainly some members have expressed to me the view that they'd like a sort of one member, one vote. Usually that's done after they've lost a particular motion, which I can understand. The democratic arrangements here in Queensland at the moment, I personally believe are solid enough. Could they be improved? Sure. Would a new model be perfect? Hell no. I don't think that's actually the big problem at our door right now, but I think it is something that needs to be explored in the future. So what I'd actually prefer to do, Mark, is to come back to your original question about the opportunities for now. So I spoke about aligning leadership with the nobility of our purpose. I do think the second challenge we have both here in Queensland but also nationally is clarity around what we do, what business we're in. I know that for the majority of folk, and I include veterans and citizens alike, when you say the word RSL, the thing that most commonly comes to the front of their mind is clubs. Now, they describe it in different ways, but it's clubs. And yet that's not what we're about, and it's not what we've been about for a long time. There's extraordinarily good work done, as we just discussed earlier, for example, on the homeless front. But those stories aren't told. It's not what comes to mind when people think of the RSL. Out in our regional and rural areas, they're extraordinarily well tied into their communities. I think we need to go through an exercise of understanding what business we're in. And I'd like to indulge in a short story, hopefully.
Certainly.
I was speaking with a gentleman called Mark Bouris a few years ago now. I personally didn't know him by name, but when I saw him, I recognised him. He's a guy who hosted The Apprentice here in Australia, and for my generation, he famously fronted a business called Wizard Home Loans. And he said that he was actually an academic, an economist, and he was at, I think it was Sydney University, when he came up with an idea for a home loan business, which he thought was different and would be a good business model. He, being an academic, didn't have equity to set up a business, so he went and approached Mr. Kerry Packer, who he knew had a lot of money, and he listened to him, liked the idea, and then for the next 6 months, Mark Bouris worked with some of Kerry Packer's staff to develop a business model. After 6 months, Boris took a call from Packer's office, said Mr. Packer would like to meet, discuss a contract. Boris turned up at the allocated time and waited for 2 hours. Evidently Mr. Packer was out for long lunch. And when he came in, he said, pointing to Mark Boris, who was sitting in the waiting area, "Boris, follow me." And he did. He followed him down the corridor into Mr. Packer's large office. Packer sat down behind his desk, took his shoes off, and then put his socked feet crossed like this and looked across at Boris, who was just standing on the other side of the desk, a bit like our colleague over here is right now. And he lit a cigarette. This is in the days when you could do that inside. And didn't say anything. Boris was feeling uncomfortable, but he thought he shouldn't break the silence until Packer did. Eventually Packer did. And he said, "Son, tell me what business you're in." And Boris was disappointed. He thought, "I'm here to sign a contract, and this guy can't even remember what my business is, and I don't think I've got a lot of time to explain to him." And before he said anything, Packer then said to him, "And don't tell me it's a home loan business." And then Boris was worried. Not only has he forgotten, but he's not going to be happy when he hears what it is. And then Packer spoke again. He said, "Because you're not in the home loan business. You're in the business of hopes and dreams. Everything you say and do, all your marketing, your branding, needs to be about hopes and dreams. Do you understand?" And Boris, realising the wisdom of that, said, "Yeah." Packer said, "Good, sign a contract." And that was the start of Vision Home Loans. So the question for the RSL is, what business are we in? It's not clubs. But we need to do our homework there. And if we get it right, and we will, though it may take some time, then it will set us up, for the next generation or so, and have front of mind what people think about when they think of the RSL. And if we can get that right, if we can align our leadership with our purpose, then we might find that more veterans think, "Hey, this is the organisation for us." Let me stop there.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's a lot we could talk about with that, and I think we don't have the time. We can talk all day about that, the ramifications and the impacts of that and how that folds out, especially in some of the other states. Actually, clubs are very tight and tightly integrated in with the RSL sub-branches, and those sort of things have been almost, in some ways, in some circumstances, I believe, possibly almost inseparable. Very difficult and challenging thing to do. But I'm not really here to make comment about that and assess that. But it is certainly a big topic, and will take some time. So, what business are we in being? Is one of the key challenges that you see is lying ahead for the next 12 months, or do you see this as a longer thing? Are there anything more sort of pressing, immediate, operationally?
So the what business we're in, getting clarity on that, I think, is a task that I personally would like to see achieved this year. Certainly, coming back to actually my own patch, our own patch. That's what I'd like us to do by the end of this year, and I would hope that we would start using that in our communications.
Yeah. And what are the challenges in actually getting all the branches to come across from all the states to agree on that vision? I mean, it's an interesting federated model that we have operating now. Is there anything that you think that you'll be doing to sort of bring some advice or leadership towards that, or do you think that there's an appetite for that already?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I think it's senior leader business. I mean, this isn't something that you sort of subcontract out to someone to work on for you. But you've got to work, I think, as you've indicated, from the newest member in the furthest away sub-branch all the way through. It's got to be a diagonal slice. But if you get it right, then you'll get enough people to buy into it. And if it is right, then the national might be interested. But I'm not doing this because I think it's nationals sort of needs to. I'm doing it because I'm personally responsible here in Queensland, and I think we need to do it. And if it works for the rest of Australia, terrific.
Yeah. And what's your reflections on what Steve's just said, Robert?
Yeah, so I think RSL Queensland
What
has...
do you think he's going to say? He's going to say that's right.
We'll talk later.
I'm interested in going from strategic to operational, right? So I'm not trying to test you and put you on the spot in front of the boss, so to speak. But there's some ramifications there for you around that, and you've got to lead day-to-day business, I suppose. So is this? There are issues around that have been raised. I had a terrific conversation last year with Major General Malik about advocacy. So Greg Malik and I spoke about that, and he was saying that RSL needs to step up. We've got to not be. He made it plainly clear that RSL National has been absent for 5 years or so, and I want to start, getting out there. And obviously we have the Royal Commission. At the moment, it's a big opportunity to promote, advocacy in one particular area, but there must be others. And I think, and this where it sort of goes from the strategy to the operational, perhaps. Probably a bit of a blend of both. But
it's a good point. And if I reflect back on that advocacy, and we're talking about big A advocacy, representation, I think we have been silent for a number of years. And when I say we, I mean the collective we. In terms of small A advocacy, in terms of representation of individual veteran needs to government, we did 6,000 primary claims last year, and we're only growing year on year. So that space we're evolving, it's the big A piece. And I think we should be in public discussion about future threats, not just to Australia's national security, but the effects on those people that have put on the uniform, put on the boots, to take up those, to take up the challenge to be part of the military.
Yeah.
I think there's a much broader piece. They're not just looking at. I think we need to look into legislation and policy and understand the effects that it's having on our veteran community. But also we need to be forward-looking and understanding of future trends, future sort of macroeconomic issues, what it means for the preparedness and the capability of our Australian Defence Force, and is government investing the right, scale of changes in
doing that higher level analysis as well.
But at the same time, we need to, I think as RSL Queensland, we need to be better at bridging the support model of that family and that community across Queensland through our sub-branches, and RSL Queensland's role in enabling that with our sub-branches, all the way through to the more acute and complex needs of a smaller cohort of veterans, and making sure that we've got the right capabilities and range of capabilities around that model to facilitate the best outcomes for those as well.
Right, and linked to that, we discussed at the interview last year some of the issues with actually attracting veterans to the RSL and the membership, and we know that. I note that maybe do something similar here, but I note that New South Wales basically you just sign up online and anybody who wants to be a member is given a membership. It's one way to do it. But that doesn't still necessarily attract people to get engaged or even to, it's not just about seeking help, but it's offering help and actually being part of the movement and being part of the community. And so I'm just interested in either of you, if you've got any views about that particular challenge, because it's one thing to talk about the current members and what's going on and the mood of the RSL as a movement with who's there now, but it could actually represent quite a lot more people and do a lot more for people and actually could achieve a lot more with expanded involvement, I guess.
My judgment is we need to lower whatever barriers there are to veterans wanting to either join or seek support from the RSL. I think, consistent with what I said before, the biggest barrier is actually they don't really know what we do because we're struggling to tell our story. I think that's the most strategic level, most important thing we can do. In terms of membership, we need to make it as simple as possible. I don't think clearly applying for membership is a barrier for some, but I don't think it's a strategic barrier. So I think that is a barrier, there's no doubt about it, and I've heard people talk about that. And we just need to make it as simple as possible. Of course, Sufficient, though, that we know that it's actually veterans who are joining, right, and therefore have voting rights. So I think it's important to protect that as well.
I think from if I look at it from an RSL Queensland lens, as the RSL Queensland branch, our future state needs to work with our sub-branches to enable them to be able to reach that community and have the facilities, the resources and the capability to be able to create that family and that connection. I think, and I know we're going to do a lot of work about what is our business, but I think it's a good start to consider. None of us joined the military for $1 million. We actually joined for some sort of purpose, unity, family, camaraderie, and we need the RSL to be able to collectively be that organisation that they naturally turn to.
Looking at, I mean, from your experience, Rob, how important are the sub-branches to what's being delivered by the state or even nationally? What's your experience with that?
The sub-branches, and I'll step through those first and then talk about its relationship with the state branch secondly. But firstly, the sub-branches are essential. You know, we've got if you look at the geographic area of Queensland, the ability to connect, to talk, to have a chat, to have a meal, whatever it may be, is essential. It's been essential in our military service to have that physical connection with other humans. It's essential in the broader part of our life. And hence, you know, that 230 odd sub-branches that are across the state in that distributed way facilitate that engagement. I think the next piece that we need to connect is how does RSL Queensland enable and support the sub-branches of that, you know, to facilitate that good work. Because if you're coming in every week or you're connecting every, you know, in a regular cycle with that local veteran community and others, you can put your hand up much easier and say, hey, I'm actually struggling. Yeah. I've actually got some more difficulty that I'm not presenting to you at the moment, but I need some help.
Yeah. So perhaps that sort of hints that there's a social dimension to the business you're in, and an important social dimension to that business.
Absolutely, I think, and I'd like to say something about that if I might, Mark, but before I do, the sub-branches are the beating heart of our organisation. No sub-branches, no RSL. And when one looks at national institutions, there is no other national institution that has the footprint across our nation that the RSL does. The Country Women's Association, which is a fantastic national institution as well, has something similar. What business are we in? Is there a social dimension? I actually think it is predominantly social. When we look at veterans, you know, from those wonderful centurions, I should say, to you know, the kids who are in their 20s. There's a small group here at one end who really are damaged by their military experience or their operational experience. And we need to provide care for them to the extent that, you know, there are other services and things that they either don't want to access or can't. There's another group who, you know, have good and bad days. And they need camaraderie and hope, and sometimes they need services. And then there's another group, much bigger group of veterans. They were wonderful, great Aussies who you know, because of their military training or their operational experience, they've actually developed and grown as humans. So that there's this big continuum. And we need to, you know, be a place for all those folks. And this bigger group here, to the extent they can, you know, can help these smaller, more challenged groups. I'm reluctant to offer my thoughts on what business we're in because I'm actually interested. Because what ends up happening, as you all know, is that okay, so you know, Dave says this, therefore that's what it is. But I'm more interested in what others think. But I think it is something like care, commemoration, mateship, and advocacy, big picture advocacy at the national level, which really the national needs to be. I hope I got to your question, Mark, if I didn't.
I think if we haven't, we've covered a lot of ground already, and it's been terrific so far. And I'm conscious of the time because I'm not sure where we're going. We're running close at the time, beyond where I thought we'd be at the moment. But it's been a terrific conversation. I certainly didn't want to close any of that down. Look, just before we finish up, I would just ask a little bit about the Royal Commission, the hearings. So I just want to cover that off. And I think we could probably keep going on some of these topics for quite some time if we wanted to. But the Royal Commission had the hearings here in Brisbane late last year, and I'm interested, and our viewers would be interested in to know what involvement RSL Queensland has had in that on the ground, whether you provided a submission, any support services, or anything else that's noteworthy of that. So maybe Robert could
happy
that
to.
one.
Yeah, it was, and I think we need to see the Royal Commission as an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for clarity, an opportunity for us for focus, and an opportunity for us to actually unite and provide tangible outcomes across the government and non-government sector and the broader sort of health-related and other community services. I attended much of the Royal Commission over the first 2 weeks in Brisbane. Firstly, RSL Queensland provided a submission which formed a pack under RSL Australia to submit a consolidated view to government or to the Commission at the time. I saw an interesting interplay in the first sort of round of hearings. The first one was the lived experience, and it's either the lived experience of family members or those who'd contemplated suicide or had maybe been in a position where they were mistreated or otherwise. But then it was also combined with some people who had experience across the broader community as well, and some professional expertise coming in. So what I felt out of the first week, there was an interesting view of the emotion and the rawness of those difficulties that some had been through in their military service or post-military service. But then also to couple with some of the more macro view of the community and how we might facilitate improvements into the system. I expect in the next round of hearings as well that rawness will still be there, and we're providing that support to people that we know of that are engaging, and we've been reaching out to some of those people. I do know that it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for individuals, and it's going to be hard for the community to relive some of the concerns. But I think if we can get to a place where we have focus and where we have government, non-government organisations, and as a sector coming together to really try and lift and shift some core changes.
It certainly would be very difficult for some of those people to actually publicly tell their stories, and that doesn't include the thousands of submissions that they've received where people have written them and sent them in and haven't taken a stand publicly as well. So a lot of people are revisiting some very, very difficult times in their lives, and I suppose that's very difficult for them and for people supporting them.
And if you look at courage, mate. It's quite very courageous.
Extremely courageous, yeah. Have you had any feedback from your members about how they, what their view of the Commission, how it's been conducted? Any sort of comments have been made that you're able to share? More
anecdotally, I do know that it's a couple of year activity, and we're in block one hearings, and block two's coming.
But they've certainly set the tone of how they're going to conduct the hearings and themselves in terms of the process.
There's been commentary around the empathy to me in it, and the commissioner and his team and the way that they've navigated people's individual challenges.
Yeah.
I think the underlying narrative across not just the Royal Commission but other outcomes, the Productivity Commission reviews, etc., that have been occurring, is doing something about it. And I think that's the key piece. I think the narrative is that if we don't see some fundamental changes in the areas that make sense to do so, then there'd be a huge disappointment.
And I'm guessing this is where RSL has a role to play, because now that all this is coming out in the public arena, and we talk about the capital A advocacy, if you like, then there's an opportunity to be part of the voices that hold those who can make decisions about how these programs are run and the support arrangements and, necessary changes in the way we run the ADF, DBA, support ex-service organisations.
I think it's an opportunity for RSL to help that redefinition of the RSL into the future.
And it coincides with that very nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah. Of course it's an opportunity. I actually think it's more than that though. It's a duty. I mean, if the RSL as the best chance as being the voice of the veterans isn't talking about this, then what are we doing? So it's a duty. On your question, if I might, Mark, about members saying things, my sense is that they were never quite articulated like this, but members were initially before the commission. They're thinking, yeah, how's this going to be run? Are they going to be reasonable? Are they going to be empathetic? The next question they really had was, and are they going to find out anything that's helpful? Are they going to recommend anything that's actually useful? And then the third question is, and if they do, is something going to be done about it? I think the first, and we don't know all the answers to those yet, but the first part is the Royal Commission going to go about its business in a way that makes folks feel okay? And I think the answer is so far that's okay. But time will tell whether the squeeze has been worth the juice. I'm very hopeful some positive things should come out of this. And we have a duty to make sure that they do.
Right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for outlining all that, and we've certainly used a little bit more time than I anticipated, but I think it was truly worthwhile. We've covered a lot of ground in terms of what lies ahead for the RSL as a movement that's going on in Queensland. We've certainly talked extensively about some of the aspects of the Royal Commission and acknowledging that it's still early days. I think you've given us a good sense of how you and some of the members have experienced it, and I think that echoes what we've been able to witness with the live streams and all that sort of thing interstate on the whole process. I think I might just close out, and I'll just ask you one very brief question. And we've talked about all the big priorities and all the big things, but I guess I want to make it a little bit more personal now. What is your individual priorities? What are the things that you're thinking about that you need to do to support the change and approach the year that we're about to face into? I might start with you, Steve, if I may.
Two thoughts for me. And generally, I will approach my responsibilities with the philosophy that I will only do what only I can do. I'm not going to. If I spend time, down under the hood of the car, then I'm not helping drive it. So I will keep my focus at the strategic level. I think that's the best way I can help sort of tackle some of these bigger issues. There are thousands of other issues under the hood, but there are plenty of folks who can sort those out. The second thing is, COVID has kept me separated from my two youngest grandkids, and I haven't seen them in quite a while, and I'm looking sometime this year to be able to give them a cuddle and say good day.
Fantastic.
For me, I'd like to see 2022 play out whereby we start changing that narrative and that culture that the RSL is there for a different purpose than what we should be there for. And so I want to get to a point where every veteran, whether they need support or they need connection or they just want to be a part of something or contribute back, as all of us joined up to do to varying degrees, I want them to see the RSL as that place that they go to, because we can actually create a movement where veterans are empowered, where veterans are thriving in life as the norm, and that mateship and that camaraderie that we lose transitioning out of service in particular needs to be where the RSL thrives and where the RSL offers a key difference. And so I see my aim in 2022 to ensure that culture of RSL Queensland branch enables and works with our stakeholders, with our sub-branches, with our partners to facilitate that environment.
Well, thank you, Stephen Day, Robert Skoda. Thanks very much, and we'll close it there.
Good on you, Mark. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.